Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full-stack developers. If you don't apply a certificate when serving a web application, a security warning will appear. This time I'll explain how to apply a certificate to the Apache HTTP server. These days, it's essential to serve web applications with a TLS security certificate. If you want to test certificates in a development environment, just like on a production server, I recommend mkcert. Since I'll be downloading pre-built binaries using wget, I'll download mkcert to the /tools/local/bin directory, which manages local executables. The current latest version of mkcert is 1.4.4. You can check the available versions by visiting the mkcert GitHub site. To make the certificates generated with mkcert recognized as trusted locally, you need to run mkcert install. You need to run it with administrator privileges, but since I have sudo enabled, I can simply prefix the command with sudo. Let's create a directory to manage certificate files for the gicha.org domain. Let's move to the created directory. If you're generating certificates with Let's Encrypt on the production server, it's best to create certificates with the same file name. I'll use the key file and cert file options to match the certificate file names used for Let's Encrypt. mkcert can issue certificates even for wildcard domains. Since the validity period is 2 years and 3 months, you can use it for almost all development purposes without renewing. If you don't configure a chain.pem file with a root authority signature, some browsers may not trust the public key certificate. Therefore, it's recommended to use fullchain.pem instead of cert.pem for the public key when registering the certificate. A fullchain.pem file contains both cert.pem and chain.pem files. Since mkcert certificates are installed locally and recognized as root-authorized certificates, mkcert doesn't require the chain.pem information. However, when applying this to a production server, you may encounter the tedious task of changing the settings for the fullchain.pem file. Copy the root ca.pem file from the ca root certificate directory. Again, match the file name with the Let's Encrypt file. Merge the cert.pem and chain.pem files to create the fullchain.pem file. A total of 4 PEM files were created. These file names are identical to the Let's Encrypt certificate files. Let's open the file that manages site-specific settings via virtual hosts. Requests to port 80 will be forwarded to Secure Protocol 443, so copy and paste the first 2 lines. Requests to port 80 using the HTTP protocol will be redirected to the HTTPS protocol. Let's configure the Secure Protocol 443. Let's enable the SSL engine module. I'll configure the public key certificate in the SSL certificate file. I'll configure the private key certificate in the SSL certificate key file. As mentioned earlier, I'll change cert.pem to fullchain.pem to configure the chain.pem file with the root authority signature. While encryption using Secure Protocol 443 is said to enhance security, it comes at a cost. The packet size transmitted and received will inevitably increase compared to before encryption, resulting in slower speeds. To secure this, you need to implement HTTP2. HTTP2 reduces latency by transmitting packets in parallel, removing duplicate headers, and compressing them. It also handles stream prioritization for parallel transmission. Therefore, if you use the HTTPS security protocol, you must implement HTTP2 to prevent performance degradation. Although the HTTP3 standard was adopted in 2022, Apache has no plans to support HTTP3 yet, so only HTTP2 can be implemented. Of course, the main change is the ability to maintain connections even when the internet IP address changes. Therefore, for general services other than video services, there may not be a significant difference compared to HTTP2. Apache has the HTTPS security protocol disabled by default. Let's load the SSL module. You must also load the Shared Object Cache Provider module. You must also include the SSL configuration file. Open the SSL configuration file. The default host has a security protocol example set to 443, but the host is different from the actual host and the certificate file doesn't match, resulting in an error. Since I've already configured the site for each host in the virtual host configuration file, I'll delete that setting. When holding down Shift and selecting a region, you can use things like Control Arrow, Control Home, Control End, etc. to select a region faster, but they don't work in Nano for Windows. Let's restart the Apache service. Let's refresh the site. The "Not Secure" message will disappear, replaced by a lock icon indicating that the site is secure. You can see that the certificate has been successfully applied. The WAMP stack is configured without MariaDB. MariaDB has no coupling, you only need to load the module for connecting to MariaDB from PHP. When explaining the implementation of storing and loading data through a database, I will explain it while installing MariaDB in MySQL modules. Thank you for watching.